There is an animal alive in the ocean right now that does not age, not slowly, not gracefully. It simply stops aging, reverses the process, and starts over. Scientists discovered this in the 1990s. It made almost no news. The species is called turritopsis dohrnii, a jellyfish roughly the size of your pinky nail. And the reason you've never heard of it isn't because it isn't remarkable. It's because what it can do is so strange that for years, researchers weren't sure they believed it themselves. Why everything you know about aging is built on one assumption. Every living thing on Earth runs on the same biological contract. You are born, your cells divide. Over time, the copying gets sloppier, errors accumulate, tissues degrade, eventually the system fails. That's not a flaw in the design, that's the design. Aging exists because evolution doesn't reward living forever, it rewards reproducing. Once you've passed your genes on, nature has no further use for you. The resources you're consuming could go to your offspring. Your death is, from evolution's perspective, efficient. That logic is so airtight, so universal, so built into every organism on Earth that biologists essentially stopped questioning it. Of course everything ages, of course everything dies. The only debate worth having was how fast and why. Then, someone looked closely at a jellyfish. What turritopsis dohrnii actually does. A jellyfish has a life cycle with two distinct phases. The polyp, a small stationary form that anchors to a surface and grows, and the medusa, the free-floating, bell-shaped form most people picture when they think of a jellyfish. The medusa is the adult. It's the phase where the animal reproduces. And in every species ever studied, the medusa is where the life cycle ends. The animal reproduces, ages, and dies. Turritopsis dohrnii does something else. When it's stressed, starving, physically damaged, or simply old, it does not die. Instead, its body begins a process called transdifferentiation. Its cells don't just stop what they're doing, they reverse what they're doing. Muscle cells become nerve cells. Skin cells become muscle cells. The entire organism contracts. Its tissues reabsorb into themselves. And the adult medusa transforms back into a juvenile polyp. Not a copy, not an offspring, the same animal, starting over. Researchers who have observed this describe it as watching something biologically impossible happen in real time. The closest human equivalent would be an elderly person physically reverting to infancy, not dying, not cloning themselves, but walking backwards through their own life until they were a child again, and then growing up all over again and being capable of doing it indefinitely. That is not a metaphor. That is what this jellyfish does. Why this took so long to take seriously. The first documented observation came from Christian Sommer, a German marine biology student working in Rapallo, Italy in 1988. He noticed that specimens he was keeping in tanks weren't dying, they were reverting. He published his findings. The scientific community largely moved on. For nearly a decade, the paper sat mostly uncited. Partly because jellyfish weren't considered scientifically glamorous, partly because the claim was so extraordinary that it required extraordinary evidence, and that evidence took time. It was Ferdinando Buero, an Italian marine biologist who pushed the research further in the 1990s and helped bring Turritopsis dohrnii to wider scientific attention. And even then, the response was cautious, because the implications, if the observation was real, were almost too large to sit with comfortably. Here's the thing about biological immortality. It sounds like science fiction, but scientists are careful with that word, and they use it here. Biological immortality doesn't mean the animal cannot die. It means the animal does not die from aging. It can still be eaten. It can still be killed by disease. It can still be physically destroyed. What it cannot do is run out of time. The clock doesn't wind down. It resets. The part that science still can't fully explain. Transdifferentiation is not unique to Turritopsis dohrnii. It happens in other contexts in biology. Salamanders can transdifferentiate cells to regrow lost limbs. Some flatworms rebuild their entire bodies from a fragment, but those are local processes, targeted repairs in specific tissues. What Turritopsis dohrnii does is system-wide, a total biological reversal, an entire organism choosing, at the cellular level, to unmake itself and begin again. The mechanism behind it is still not fully understood. Researchers have identified that certain genes are being switched on and off during the reversion process, genes associated with cell pluripotency, the same quality that makes stem cells so medically valuable. The cells are essentially being told to forget what they became and return to what they were before they specialized. What triggers the process is still partly unclear. Stress appears to be the initiating factor. Physical damage damage, starvation, environmental pressure. But researchers have also observed reversion in specimens that appeared healthy, with no obvious stressor present. Some have begun to wonder whether the animal doesn't just revert when it has to, whether it reverts when it chooses to. That question has no settled answer yet. Why immortality might be a trap. Here's the part that gets uncomfortable. Turritopsis dohrnii is not the only organism that appears to resist aging. There are others. The naked mole rat lives roughly 10 times longer than any rodent its size and shows almost no biological signs of aging across its lifespan. Certain species of rockfish have been found alive at over 200 years old with cellular markers that look decades younger. Greenland sharks, slow, strange, nearly blind, are now believed to live past 400 years. One specimen, estimated at roughly 392 years old, was swimming in the North Atlantic during the reign of Queen Elizabeth I. These animals aren't immortal, but they found something the rest of biology mostly hasn't: a way to slow the contract down. And here's what's strange about all of them. None of them are dominant. None of them have taken over. The naked mole rat lives in small underground colonies. The rockfish exists in specific cold water environments. The Greenland shark moves so slowly it barely seems to be alive. Biological longevity, in every case we know of, comes with a cost. Slower metabolism, lower reproduction rate, reduced energy, smaller range. Living longer seems to require trading something else away. And Turritopsis dohrnii, the only organism that can reset entirely, is a jellyfish the size of a thumbnail. In 35 years of study, it hasn't evolved into something larger, something more complex, something that dominates its ecosystem. It's still small, still nearly invisible, still at the mercy of every current and every predator in the water around it. Immortality, in every case we can examine, is not an advantage. It's a different kind of compromise. What this actually means. In the last 2 decades, Turritopsis dohrnii has begun appearing in places it wasn't found before. Researchers believe it has been spreading globally through ballast water and cargo ships, water taken on in one ocean and discharged in another, carrying larvae along with it. It has been documented in the Mediterranean, the Atlantic, the Pacific, the waters around Japan. Wherever it arrives, it appears to establish itself quietly, multiplying, resetting, living in that borderless space between old and young that no other animal has ever found. There is no way to know how old the oldest individual is, because it doesn't carry its age the way other organisms do. There's no ring in its tissue to count. No cellular clock that registers the accumulation of years. It just keeps going and starting over. Science has not figured out how to apply what Turritopsis dohrnii does to human biology. The gap between a cnidarian's cellular mechanics and a human body is enormous. But the genes involved in the reversion process, pluripotency switches, the dedifferentiation signals, are being studied, because they point towards something the medical world has been circling for decades: the possibility that aging is not a fixed sentence, that it is a program, and that programs can, under the right conditions, be interrupted. We are nowhere near that. But we are looking at an animal that figured it out 500 million years ago, before complex nervous systems existed, before anything with a spine had crawled onto land, and it has been quietly resetting in the dark water ever since. The ocean has been alive for longer than the land. It keeps secrets the way deep things do, slowly, completely, with no particular interest in being found. Somewhere in the Mediterranean right now, something the size of your pinky nail is getting old, and then it isn't, and then it starts again.